So we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. Enough intros. Enough talking about, we're going to talk about this. We're actually going to talk about it today. So, how many of you value relationships? Okay, good. You're in good company. How many of you are experts in communication and have no room to grow? Not me. You know, it's funny. I was just sharing with the vendors the other night how the Lord is showing me. You know, people say to me at times, like, I was actually a communication major in college, which is kind of funny. And then, you know, some people are like, oh, you're a great communicator. And the Lord is showing me lately, you suck at communication. I mean, he says it nicer than that. That's my interpretation. But he's like, you know, communication is a lot more than verbal. You know, there's so much more about communication. And we know, like, how many of you know, I don't remember what the percentages are, but body language. It's like 90% or something ridiculous of communication is through body language.
58%.
58? Is it 58? Okay. Still.
And then the rest is, 12% is verbal, and then the rest is
like inflections.
your
and,
attitude and tone.
Yes. Okay. So I guess I'm clumping together like body and like inflections and, you know, that type of thing. But yeah, not. When I say nonverbal, I guess what I'm saying is not the words that are coming out of your mouth. It's all the color, okay? And so, how many of us know that communication is actually not one way, it's two ways? Okay, so listening is a huge part of communication, which I'm learning I'm really bad at. Really bad at. And, but it's not okay to just say, like, yeah, I suck at communication or I suck at listening. Like, okay, the first step is admitting, right? But it's not okay to stay there. So I've had to, you know, and this didn't just happen overnight, you know, I've had to make a commitment to the Lord and to my wife and to people that I'm in close relationship with and to myself. Like, I'm going to be a better listener, right? And so I write notes. I do certain things to help myself become a better listener, but it is something that I don't do naturally very well. And probably a lot of that is because I was incredibly self-centered and selfish for so much of my life that I have to unlearn selfishness. And so, you know, when you're concerned about yourself, it's really hard to listen because listening is about caring about what they're saying. It's hard to do when you don't care about, you know, not that you don't care about people, but when you care about yourself more than everyone else. And so, again, what we're going to be talking about in the coming weeks is not just like, well, the Bible says go to your brother when you have an offense. And then if that doesn't work, you take a friend. And if that doesn't work, you go to the church. Okay, well, that's good to know in principle, of course, but what does that actually look like practically? How does that play out? And other principles with dealing with, you know, our brothers and sisters, both Christian and non-Christian. What does it look like to love people? We're going to be giving very practical application, practical skills. That's why it's called emotionally healthy skills. But again, it's not just good enough to say, okay, I'm bad at listening or whatever, I'm bad at this, and here's a skill you can do. Like, I could do this and it would make me so much better at listening. But if you don't do it, it's not going to make you any better, right? I was at the breakfast for the Post fundraiser this morning, and they had a sign that said, if nothing changes, then nothing changes. So profound. It's like, wow. You know, and that's what I'm talking about, right? If we don't change and do something differently, you're going to get the same result again, right? And so it's like, we continue doing the same thing. It's like, well, but I know the scripture now. Well, great, what are you doing about it? You know? Okay, so So I'm kind of going in circles here, but I'm doing it on purpose. I'm trying to get the point across that, like, it's going to be hard to want to actually apply some of the things we're going to teach. So I don't want to just give you good information and have you like take it and put it in your information bank and be like, now I know that if I want to grow, or if someone wants to grow in this, that this is what they do. Great, but have you tried it? Have you actually gotten better? And so last week we talked about the bicycle analogy, where how many of you, before you rode a bike, well, I should ask the question, how many of you can ride a bike? I'm making a huge assumption there, but so the first time that you got on a bike, how many of you could ride it the very first time because you read about how to ride a bike, you heard testimonies about how to ride a bike, you memorized the steps to riding a bike, and then when you hopped on, you're like, I've done all the work, I just got on, you got on and rode. No. Oh, you did, yeah. Prodigy. Okay, so it's that way with anything spiritual. It's the same thing. We have to apply and do, right? So it's not enough for me to give you skills without you actually doing them. It's not enough for me to know these skills without actually doing them. So I think I shared last week also that I'm practicing all these on my wife, for better or for worse. That's what I married her for, right? And so we'll see how it goes, but, and I admitted last week too, if you didn't hear, that some of the things we're going to talk about are just, they're cheesy, right? They're cheesy, but they work, right? And so, you know, the Lord really convicted me about whether or not I was willing to do things that I thought were, you know, a little, and, you know, if I valued relationship enough to try things by people that actually know what they're talking about because they've done it, right? Because they've said, these skills actually work. And so it's about trying, you know, any skill you learn from the person, and you learn to do it the way that person did it. You don't try your own way until you've done it their way, and then you start doing it your own way, right? And so it's going to be the same as we go through these emotionally healthy skills. We're going to try things that they're very mechanical, they're a little bit cheesy, and it's because it's not your language, it's not your own yet. But you will learn to do the concepts and the principles in your own style, in your own way that's relevant to you. Does that make sense? So that's important to keep in mind. So as we go through some of this stuff, even today, don't think like, I have to talk like this to people, right? You may, with close relationships, they know that you're growing and working on these skills. You may actually use this language for a while, but again, it just, you're creating a habit, a heart change that will then be reflected in whatever vocabulary you choose to use. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, what we're going to talk about today is a skill called community temperature reading. Okay? Anyone that wants one of these, just let me know. I'll get you one. I can email you a PDF of it, and I can also print it out for you and make it available. We may actually even make it available on the website where we do our teaching resources. But again, this I kind of joked about putting this on the fridge, but I'm living with my in-laws and I don't want to clutter their fridge. But if I was in my own house, just to be funny, I would put it on my fridge. But these are going to be skills to go through with people. And the purpose of community temperature reading is to increase awareness within yourself of your God-given value and the God-given value of another person. And to also facilitate healthy relationships with other people. So this is literally the foundation of where we're heading. Because this is, how many of you know when you use a thermometer, it doesn't diagnose the problem, it just says something's going on, right? And so that's the same thing with this. This is just a way of taking a temperature, so to speak, of community. You can use this in many different contexts. We'll talk a little bit at the end what kind of context this is good for, but it's good for relationships. That's where we'll start. Okay, let me see what I got going on here. Okay, I'm not going to go too far. So the first layer is, so basically these are 5 steps of checking in with community. The first layer being appreciations and excitements. This is kind of weird for me to teach on this stuff because it's so practical. It's not what I'm normally teaching on, so I usually feel mechanical in what I'm doing right now, but I'm going to get over it real quickly. So here's the weird thing, appreciations and excitement. So what this looks like is sitting down together and saying, okay, we're going to do we're going to check in with each other. You can call it whatever you want, but it's checking in with each other. So you can do this one-on-one with your romantic other. You can do this with a small group. I actually used my interns as guinea pigs Tuesday, and we kind of had fun with this. And you can use this with staff at church. You can use this with your people you work with at work if you lead a group of people or whatever. This is great for all those things. But you're checking in with them, and the first step is to learn what types of things they appreciate and are excited about. It changes, right? It's not about like, you don't share the same thing every week or every day. It's not like, well, I'm still excited about, like, I want to be an astronaut someday, right? It's like, well, we heard that, Johnny, right? So it's sharing like something relevant, something real in your life. And this is, I'm really excited about, like, the trip we're going on in a week. I'm really excited about that. Where it gets funny is appreciations. Because you can say anything you want, but where the rubber really meets the road is when you say, like, Lacey, we really appreciate you, Lacey. And it's funny because even pastors, pastors are perfect people, right? That's what everyone thinks. Not. Okay. But even pastors or people that you think, should be good at giving people, compliments and sharing appreciation, that it's like one of those things that makes people red, like embarrassed. Like, we appreciate you. It's like one of those type of things. Why is that? It's so weird. We're not going to go into all why that is, because I think there's a lot to that. But just keep that in mind, that this is something you're going to have to fight through, because it's going to be awkward. Especially if it's a relationship that you're not used to actually communicating in this way with. Okay? You're going to have to say things you appreciate about them. So fight through that. It's important. It's incredibly important. The other thing to note here is that if it is an awkward thing, it's probably a good indicator that A, it wasn't a norm for you growing up in your family context, right? So if there weren't appreciations being given, on a regular basis, that was normal, that's probably an indicator that, like, oof, why does it make me feel so weird to say that to people? Or, and kind of linked to that also is probably an indicator of some type of a stronghold of some kind, right? Because that would be an emotion that's disproportionate to what you're doing, or inaccurate to what you're doing. May actually be a little more appropriately said. But so does that make sense? So fight through that. Question?
Is this different than just saying thank you?
Is this different than just saying thank you? That's the question. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Because it's a value statement. It's not about action.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be like, well, thanks for taking the trash out.
Right.
It's saying like, thank you for being who you are. Those types of things. So that's a good question. So these, as you do these appreciations, probably it would be a good idea to think of them in terms of value. Building people up based on their value, not what they can do. not what they give you or whatever. And not that it's wrong to say, like, I really appreciate, like, when you give me hugs, or I really appreciate your worship leading, that's great, that's not wrong. But how much more powerful is it to begin to do this? Again, this is another skill, learning how to build up people value, give them value. We all need that. That's huge. Okay, so let's move on. Number 2, the next step up on the thermometer is worries, concerns, or puzzles. Okay? Many times we think we're going to look stupid if we don't know something. Again, probably another stronghold if that's you. I mean, I know for me, growing up, that was huge for me. Like, I did not like to look like I didn't know what was going on. That was a no-no. There's so many, I want to go so many directions right now. So we gotta fight through that. But how freeing and refreshing is it to just be like, I'm really worried about this, or I'm puzzled about this. I don't really know what's happening here, or it's okay. So puzzle. My wife and I kind of have a joke about the word puzzle. It's kind of like, it can be used in the context of like replacing the word like ticked off. Like, I'm really puzzled. I'm really puzzled at you right now, But the guy that wrote this material, he talks about the word puzzled can save you from sinning like 90% of the time, what he says. Because it keeps you from the assumptions. Example, you're a boss at work, and you tell one of your employees, you say, look, go over this report real quick, and then send it to me. I want to look over it, and then I'll give you the okay, and then send it to the rest of the group. Okay, and then you get the email of the final, and it was sent to everyone. Okay? So instead of just like, I'm going to kill him, like, I told you to do this, and he didn't do that, I'm puzzled. So it's a skill, again, a skill and you don't have to use the word puzzle, but it's just an opportunity to go to the person and say, like, I'm kind of puzzled. I thought that I told you, or I asked you to send the email to me first so we could go over it, and then you would send it to them. Well, what happened? Instead of like, you did, right? Pointing the finger, you, this and this and this. Instead, you're putting it in your, I'm puzzled, right? You're not accusatory. So again, these are incredibly important skills. This is painfully simple and painfully powerful. It's incredible how these skills really play out, because we're so insecure, very sensitive people, typically, right? So these little assumptions and things that we do, like, it builds and we get angry and offended and all this stuff. So that's a good skill to learn, instead of jumping to conclusions. Because what if he just didn't hear you? What if he didn't get the email that you sent him? What if he forgot? What if, who knows? What if, he, got run over by a Mack truck? Or, who knows? Right? But you don't know, and until you know, I'm puzzled. And then once you realize, oh, well, I just wanted to send it to them because I didn't think I needed to send it to you. Okay, well, that's a problem. We can address that. But you don't know it's a problem until you know it's a problem. Okay? And the same thing with worries and concerns. This step in the process helps us to reduce assumption making. Okay? Then with the worries and concerns, a lot of what that is again just being a little bit vulnerable. Sometimes, like, I'm really worried about my daughter traveling 500 miles to college alone. Okay, what's valuable in knowing that information? Well, it's valuable now you know what someone is thinking and feeling. Now you actually are starting to know that person, not just about that person, right? So intimacy is not about knowing facts and information about a person, right? Your best friend you know because you know them. because they share their thoughts, their worries, their concerns, their struggles with you, not because they said, oh, you want to be my friend? Here's my bio. And you like look through their bio, like, I know that she graduated from this college and got this GPA, but you don't actually know them, right? Now translate this over, this is a little bit of a side note, but translate this over to our relationship or lack thereof with the Lord. A lot of times we know a lot about God, but do we know Him, right? And part of knowing, as we're learning, is receiving. It's not giving all the time, it's receiving. So we need to get to that point where we're receiving information from people. Because now we're getting a picture of not just facts and information, we're getting their heart. Oh, you're worried about that? Oh, now I know that it's something that's going on inside, right? Or you're really concerned about this? Okay, now I know. So again, it's just temperature reading. It doesn't, we haven't given the formula of what to do with this information yet, but we're just getting a reading, right? So number 3, complaints and possible solutions. Just a side note, be wise as you use this. If you're like a group leader at work or something and there's a very volatile situation and you're doing community temperature reading, maybe you skip this one, right? Because everyone's ticked off and angry and you think they're going to have some complaints. Yeah, you know they're going to have complaints. You already know that, so deal with that in a different way, but this is not for that. How many of you were taught when you were growing up, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all? So what we actually were teaching or being taught in that is that if you have a real concern about something, or if you don't have a dislike, if you don't agree with us, it doesn't matter. You can say it a bunch of different ways, but we only value you if you look how we want you to look. We only value you if you value what we value, right? So I understand the point of that saying is to just don't quit being negative, right? So obviously negativity is not a good thing. But that's why this is complaints with possible solutions. Because you're inviting people to give a solution to the problem that they're complaining about, right? So, honey, I notice that, this is an example, I notice that when you're done driving the car, you don't hang the keys up. They end up in your pocket. So I would really appreciate, like, when you're done with the car, just hang them up. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a complaint and a solution. Instead of like, quit keeping the keys in your pocket, or how often do we communicate in those ways, right? Or I noticed that oftentimes I get in the car and it's on E after you've driven it, and so I would prefer that you would be a little bit more mindful about filling it up. Because I feel like it's me filling it up all the time. Okay, there's a complaint, but also a possible solution. Again, a much different tone than saying like, you never fill up the car. Right? And okay, that's me. Right? Where are my keys? I do that a lot. Or where's this? Where's that? As if she like took it and placed it somewhere. Right? Okay, so offering solutions keeps negativity from building, right? But you need a place to communicate things that you don't like, right? Because it's okay to not love everything, right? Okay, so number 4 is just new information. This is where you just share new information. Right? That's a real hard one. Okay, so really this is just where the relationship moves beyond the surface, and again, it's extracting that which is inside, getting more information so that you're beginning to know that person more, not just about them, okay? And it's just good communication. Hey, we got this family get-together coming up in 2 weeks. They want to know what we're going to bring, what kind of dish we're going to bring, so we need to talk about that at some point. Wow, instead of like showing up, or maybe it's the day of, and you're scrambling around trying to get something made, and then the other one runs to the store and comes back with something, and you're like, well, I was just making something for that. Well, I was just going to go get something, and well, we never communicated about it. Okay, so it's just communication. New information can help with that. Number 5, hopes and wishes. Again, just going to that next level of what's inside of you that you want to share with me because I actually value you and want to know about you, right? So this is where you kind of get a window into people's soul, and you learn to really know people at a deeper level. How empowering is this skill when you ask people? I want to know, like, what are your hopes and wishes? No one's ever cared to ask me. I don't even know. No one's ever asked me that before, right? So how empowering is it, especially if you're in a relationship where you're kind of in the power position? Like I don't mean power as in a negative way, but like you're a boss at a job, or you're a husband with your wife, or you're a father or a mother with your child, where you're in that position where you're saying, okay, let's talk about, like, what are some things that you really hope and wish for and desire for? Wow, you actually care, right? So it's incredibly empowering to pull that stuff out of people. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the context of which to use this, but again, it can be done in married couples. It can be done in church staff type of thing. It can be done in your small groups. It can be done in really any relationship that you want to grow deeper, right? So obviously, like a boss-employee type of relationship, well, it may be a context where you actually do want to know, you want to grow in relationship with those people, but it may just be, well, it's really going to help, it could be just a purely functional type of issue where, well, it just helps us work better when we know about each other, so it's just better communication. But especially this is good in situations where there's a mutual desire to grow in intimacy. And intimacy doesn't mean like physical intimacy, right? It just means in like connection, closeness. Make sense? And using this, as we use this tool, gauge how you use it based on how much time you have. Okay, so for instance, if you have a small group of 10 people, you may not have time to go through all of these with each person. Like, okay, everyone share this. Okay, now everyone go to this one. You just might not have time, so you might pick a few. Or like I mentioned before, if it's a very volatile situation, you maybe say like, let's not do the complaints. We already know everyone's ticked off, right? And that type of thing. So, and also just gauge it and use it based on the environment that you're in. Common sense. So again, if I didn't already communicate this to you yet, in order for this to actually work and make changes, we actually have to do it. So I can't like knock on your door and be like, have you done your CTR today? Right? I mean, I could. Actually, it'd be kind of fun, be creepy, be a little bit creeper-like. But you know, honestly, like I'm not going to guilt you into doing anything. And it's quite possible that the Lord might tell you not to, but I doubt it. But it's possible. So just pray about it, okay? So that brings us to our meditation point. this is a repeat from last week because I think it's still applicable, okay? So continue meditating and praying about a relationship. Maybe there's a couple of them, but specifically a relationship or a group of relationships, like a small group or whatever context the Lord would highlight to you that that you need to grow in, okay? For me, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, of course, I'm going to be working with my interns and all that, but I'm like, I'm going to use this in my relationship with my wife. Like, why not? Okay, so that's your meditation point. Practice the CTR with someone at least 3 times this week. Okay, this is where the rubber meets the road. Again, this is not about me like, you're not as holy if you don't do this, right? It's not the point. But if you feel like this is, an opportunity to say, okay, maybe this will work, maybe or not, I'm going to give it a try, okay? But I'm going to tell you, like, you have to do this over an amount of time for it to really work, right? Because it's a process of learning to communicate, right? You're not going to do it 3 times this week and be like, man, our marriage is so much better. My small group, we're like amazing right now. We did it 3 times. No, you're probably not even going to know the difference in a week. But in a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year, years, guarantee you'll see difference, okay? And it's not the terminology and the things, the steps necessarily. It's just learning the heart behind how to communicate effectively and value people enough to listen. Yeah.
Should this be like a partner that knows what we're doing here? Or could this be like a different relationship where they have no idea what CTR is and they don't know that you're actually practicing something, you're just...
That's a good question.
doing it?
Some of these principles would work without them knowing what you're doing. So you could just ask someone, what are your hopes and dreams? I mean, they might be like, why are you asking me that? You don't care. But yeah, I mean, just learning to communicate some of these things, like listening to people, that alone is really important. But for some of those like marital relationships, close related, close friendships or groups, that type of thing, the most benefit would come from a mutual exchange. And so, it would be, okay, it would be a propositional, like, you can't both grow if one of you wants to and the other one doesn't. So it has to be a mutual thing. So you might say like, hey, I got this thing, you want to try it? And we'll see how it goes, but let's just, regardless of whether we use the CTR, like, let's do something to be intentional about just communicating better. Like, let's check in with each other every night. Let's check in with each other once a week, or whatever the context is. And communicate some things we're not used to communicating, just so we are a little healthier, right? Anyone that does marriage counseling would tell you that, the overwhelming majority of conflicts in marriage is lack of communication or poor communication. The majority. Now, some would say, well, it's finances. A lot of people do fight about money. That is a root of a lot of marital problems, but it's because they're not communicating about money. So it's almost always money, or communication. It's all about money. We just want your money. Did I say that? It's a joke. So yeah, communication is so important. So really, all of what we're going to be talking about with these skills in the future is going to be coming back to communication. So one of the things that I may talk about this in the coming days a little bit, but I just want to hit it now because this is something that really changed my perspective several years ago. when the Lord really convicted me about this reality that you may not agree with this, but it's all right. Test it. I guarantee it's true. But what I found in my life is the way in which I am listening to other people is the way in which I'm listening to God. Guaranteed. So when I am really struggling with hearing the Lord in a season or whatever, I can almost every time, in fact, probably every time, look at, okay, what are my relationships like with people right now? Oh yeah, I'm not listening to anyone. Okay. And so use that as a gauge, a tool. If you're in a situation where you're struggling hearing the Lord, now we go in seasons and out of seasons. There's a time for all of that, and that's a different thing. But if you're struggling, check that out. There are different levels of listening. We may go into that in the future, but just to give you kind of an idea of some of the different types of listening are like some type of, there's levels of, I would call them levels of listening. The ultimate goal of listening is spiritual listening, where you're attentive to what someone is saying, you're actually hearing what they're saying and listening to what they're saying, you're retaining it. And at the same time as that, you are listening to the Holy Spirit speak to them about what they're saying. That is the goal, the ultimate goal. And there's levels in between there. How much of it, just to give you an example, how many of us, this is me, you're listening enough to formulate your next thing you're going to come back with, right? Or you're just really looking to insert your agenda back into the conversation or whatever. Whereas, real listening is a genuine concern for that person, a genuine desire to hear and listen. It's not as much a desire to communicate to them, it's to hear them and listen to them. So again, we'll hopefully at some point we'll go through some of the levels of listening, because it's profound when you start breaking it down and like, oh yeah, I do that. Yes, I do this. I do this. And then to know what the goal is, it really helps us slow down and like, okay, am I actually listening? No, I'm not listening at all right now. Okay, now I'm listening, right? And we just check ourselves. But it's a skill that once we learn to hone that skill, it transfers over into our ability to hear the Lord. And then our prayers become less us talking, and it becomes more us listening. And instead of rushing into our prayer list, we listen first and pray as we felt led. Weird enough, I actually just had a situation the other day where I was praying and I kind of just sat and listened for a little bit, and then I was like, oh, I think I'm supposed to pray this. So it didn't make any sense to me. I just prayed it. And then literally the next day, I was hit with this situation that was exactly what the Lord told me to pray. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. It's like God actually speaks. So again, like listening is an incredible tool of communication, right? It's not just about getting out concepts and ideas, communicating those, it's receiving. So how many of you are actually going to do this? I'm just kidding.